turnout, and it's 10 o'clock. So let me just say this is our second last presentation for the fall. And Allen has kindly offered to give a personal view of EVs, and I rather like it. Allen has a unique sense of humor, and he sort of incorporates it into his views of electric vehicles. The other members of our group, two of us have Teslas, and I think Tesla perhaps gets overworked. And I'm really pleased that Allen gives General Motors a plug, as well as other cars. And he starts here with the history. So I think it provides a different perspective than owners of the Tesla would give, and I think it's good to round it off. Also, there are a lot of good facts here, so I think you'll all enjoy it. And Allen, you're well known to everybody, so you don't need an introduction beyond anything you'd like to say. So you have it. Go for it.
Okay. Well, first I'm going to apologize for having kind of botched my PowerPoint presentation here, but Richard's going to be the one advancing the slide, so I'll ask him to advance a slide as we come to him. So let's go to the next one. Okay.
Yeah, that's an example of a funny beta. I don't know what it's doing there.
Yeah. When I redid it, and you can't see my version, I got rid of that. But anyway, it says not odorous. Okay. In the early 1900s, electric cars were very popular. There were even stores in New York City with underground parking where charging was available.
Wow.
It brought the ladies to the store and they charged up and they went home. But this was actually even before the era of the gas station. In the early automotive days, you would actually go to the hardware store and buy containers of gas and pour it in your car. You might have them pour it in for you. And there wasn't much of a gasoline infrastructure at the time. And so if you're just going to tool around town, electric car is a great way to go. And a few of them are still running around. So let's go to the next slide.
I heard that doctors also liked them because they were fairly well dressed up with their bags, and they didn't want to be caught cranking these things and having fumes around. So popular with women as well as physicians.
Yeah. And let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is a lot of my personal background here. I've been a small car owner for a long time. I was an environmentalist in high school days in the early 70s and 60s even. And I started in with a little Fiat, which I drove around in Korea of all places. And then after I came back from the service and was in California, I had a white 73 Honda Civic, which I liked quite a bit. And then when I got out of the service, I drove it back to Illinois, towing a trailer with motorcycles on it. In 81, I bought a new Honda Civic GL, drove it for 10 years and hundreds of thousands of miles. And it was a good, reliable car. Actually, it never was sold. It went to a salvage yard. It rusted out. But I wasn't turned off on Civics, and I bought a 92 Civic VX that would get over 60 miles a gallon when it was brand new. And at the end of its life with 300,000 miles was still getting 40 miles to the gallon. Interestingly, you'll see a picture of it here shortly. I sold it to a young man. I had a spare Honda Civic for parts for $3,000 in 2020, and he was glad to come have them. So I kind of miss it. I was always interested in the Honda Insight, which is nothing like the new Honda Insight. They were an all aluminum bodied car with a small engine and a small battery for hybrids. They would, the people that had them loved hypermiling, and they could get over 100 miles to the gallon in theirs. and the price of them is still extraordinarily high. You try to buy a used early Insight, and you'll pay a lot for one. In April of 2008, I started writing a column for the Rock River Times here in Rockford, which is a weekly paper called Mr. Green Car. And so I started in on describing hybrid drive systems and that sort of things. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, there's Mr. Green Car's green car. This is just before it was rolled off to go to its new owner here, and I fought rust issues over the year. That's why the difference in color of paint. I had to repair the rear fenders twice, and I just loved the car. Kept it going, but it was getting parts for it and such were difficult, and I was tired of crawling around under it, changing exhausts and that. So,
what did you say was the average mileage on that car?
This car, in later years, over 40. When it was brand new, the EPA rating was 55 mpg, and it seriously got that, and I got better than that sometimes. I went from Rockford to Zion, Illinois, and back on 2 gallons of gas once, so that's pretty good.
Yes.
Let's go to the next slide. More of my stuff is I started getting into the hybrid stuff, and I was analyzing it and explaining it, and over time it got where I couldn't keep up with who was making what, and having a hybrid had become like no big deal. It wasn't even news. And fortunately, EVs came along, and I started delving into them a great deal. I would go to the Chicago Auto Show searching out the new EVs, and every new Chicago Auto Show, there would be more and more of them, until now I have no idea what's actually out there. I don't have a comprehensive list in my head, and every month something new comes out. And this is without even looking at what the Chinese have available. If there starts being Chinese dealerships showing up on our shores, they'll just truly flood the market with EVs. But we're here to talk about the pros and cons of EV ownership, and not about the particular vehicles. You see here that at one time I considered making my own EV, but they used lead acid batteries, ordinary 12-volt golf cart batteries, and they're heavy, they're slow, it takes a long time to recharge them, and so there just wasn't much temptation to go that route. The long ago Chevrolet EV1 that they built that everybody loved, it was a lead acid battery car as well, and Chevrolet destroyed nearly all of them. And everybody says, "Oh, Chevrolet killed the electric car." Well, they knew that practically it wasn't going to work out. It just wasn't really marketable as is, although it was a nice enough car and people liked them. About the time the Tesla Roadster started rolling, we'll have a picture here in a moment. I was starting to drive the Nissan Leaf around. Although it only had 100 miles of range, it was reasonably priced as compared to the Teslas. And not too long after that, Chevrolet in 2012 or 2011 started selling the Volt, which is a plug-in hybrid with both an engine and electric drive system. And I saw that I would probably like having a Volt in my garage after having test drove one. And in the fall of 2013, we bought a used Volt with only like 8,500 miles on it. And it was a 2013 that we bought in 2013. My theory is that somebody got the tax credits on it and then returned the car, basically. So let's go to the next slide. Richard, there we go. There's the Tesla. They were pricey, they were fast, they were built with a Lotus chassis. They were truly a sports car. And I saw them, but up close and personal, but I never got a chance to drive one. I would still love to drive one. They're hot. Oh, let's go to the next slide. This is our 2013 Volt on its very last day. Sadly, this is taken. My wife was driving to the YMCA in Rockford and was hit by a hit and run driver that spun her around and knocked the right rear suspension off, and the car was totaled. This is where she managed to drive it out of the way of a very busy intersection, but she wasn't hurt, and that led to us having our next cars. Let's go to the next slide. This is more about the Volt, actually. We would still be driving that Volt if it hadn't been totaled. And at the time the insurance company paid us off, we just didn't feel like buying another Volt right then. Kind of in the theory is if your dog dies and you go get another dog identical to the one that just died, it's just like it's just something creepy about getting another identical Volt. And so I wanted to shop around and do some other things, and I bought my wife a used Cadillac STS, which has turned into nothing but a money pit, and I ended up buying her a Chevy Bolt, which will be more about that here in a second. You can see with the Volt, and I'm going to talk a bit on plug-in hybrids here right now, and you can see all this, is that there's still a great option. If you don't have a two-car family where you have a gas-burning car on one side and you drive your electric car on the other, having a plug-in hybrid is really good. And several automakers, Hyundai and Kia, have them, as well as Toyota and others. Chevrolet quit making the Volt, which is really sad, but the main thing was they were losing money on them, and they just didn't want to go any further with it. It's really an amazing bit of engineering that it all works so well and so seamlessly, switching from one to the other. And there are a lot of different ways to skin the cat when you drove it. You could force it to drive on the engine and save your battery range for your destination and whatever. But we really did like it, and it was very efficient. The later Volts, if you're thinking of getting a Volt, you got to buy a used one, but get a 2016 through 2018. They have a better drivetrain, a little bigger battery, and they get by on regular unleaded gas, whereas ours you had to buy premium, which was something of a disadvantage. But my theory was that Chevrolet was getting the most out of its tiny engine, and they thought you'd be driving mostly on electricity, so why worry about what you spend on gas? That is until you drive your car to New Orleans and back. So anyway, but we wanted more range. We really, really wish that the Volt would have had 100 miles of EV range. So let's go to the next slide. Enter the Bolts. The one on the right is, let's go one more slide here. Okay, so this is a little bit of work here. I bought the blue one new in July of 2020 off the showroom floor at Middleton Chevrolet. It now has 60,000 miles. I've never paid for electricity away from home, which is something that seems to bother people, but I've gotten free electricity. The longest trip I've gone in one direction is from Rockford to Oshkosh, where I'd gotten electricity at my destination. The people I was visiting, I just plugged into a regular 110 volt outlet.
Alan, could you elaborate on free electricity? You're still charging it at home.
I'm in. Well, it's part of getting free electricity away from home.
Okay, so you had I think, just to get you to elaborate a little more, I think you had electricity. You did most of your charging in Rockford. where the cost was considerably lower than Wisconsin, right?
Yeah, that's coming up in another
Okay.
slide here.
Okay.
So I'm not going to elaborate too much on the cars, but in the end, we got the 2018 the orange burst metallic colored Bolt, which we think is butterscotch, and my wife we've named it Butters, and so you may see the license plate around town, Butters with BUTTR5, because all the Butters are taken up. You can't get a license plate in Wisconsin that says Butters. So it had its battery freshly replaced just as we bought it. It had like no miles on it, which is great. Essentially, we got a brand new car, even though it was a 2018. And I had always wanted that color. Even when I bought the blue one, I really wanted this orange burst metallic color because I'd seen it as a custom paint at the Chicago Auto Show, and they said they would not have the that color available. But lo and behold, they started making that color, and Chevrolet made the color, and then available across their line, and other makes started using the same color across their line. So the auto industry quite often will follow a leader, just like nowadays. Gloss gray colored cars are really popular. I would have never predicted it, but somebody started doing that. Now everybody does it. So,
Alan, could I ask you a quick question?
sure.
And now might not be the ideal time, but on that slide, you've got a recall due to a handful of fires while charging. And that is, you have a slide later coming up about that. But is it because they didn't follow the advice of the manufacturer? Or was it sloppy handling, or was it some problem with the car?
It was an actual manufacturing defect by the battery manufacturer. A grand total of 13 cars caught fire. And the Chevrolet's way to deal with it in the meantime while your car is awaiting its battery replacement. Now, the 2020 doesn't have those batteries. The 2020 doesn't get a battery replacement because it's got the new better batteries. Okay. But their thing was to have you not charge more than 80% until you got your battery replaced. Yeah. Or there's kind of a test. There's a self-test that it can do where you go 6,500 miles. And if it passes the test after 6,500 miles, then you can return to 100% charging. So that none of that applies to either of our cars now.
Okay,
so,
thank you for that.
Yeah.
Shall I go on?
Just an abundance of caution on General Motors' part to do this. And
okay.
I think LG is the one who makes the batteries for them. Chevrolet uses a different kind of battery on their cars instead. Tesla's basically got big laptop batteries by the thousands, whereas Chevrolet and GM have used a larger plate kind of thing. I've seen online videos of people taking a Bolt battery apart, and it's just incredibly complex. It's just an incredibly complex thing. But anyway, let's move on to the next slide. Now we're getting to the positives and negatives concerning EVs. They're quiet, they're efficient, they're odor-free. You don't need to go to the gas station except to get coffee. You don't need to stand in the cold to fill your tank. And this is a decided plus that women still like very much. It's a big attraction like the early EVs that women just don't like going to the gas station. And it's easy to sell an EV to them, saying you never have to go to the gas station again. And at that, if you're just driving around a little town, I've tried to sell the idea that people that live in a small town like Broadhead and then hardly ever leave town, you could just charge your car once a week off your regular 110 volt outlet and drive around all week. it'd be very easy to do. When you charge on 110 volts, you put about 5 miles of range in for every hour you're plugged in. So even with the Volt, which had a 15 kilowatt battery pack, it could charge on a regular 110, 120 outlet overnight and be full in the morning. So, and I carry a cord around in my Bolt, which really is just for emergencies. I don't know why. It's just useless weight, but it's useless at home if I needed it. So I suppose if I somehow mysteriously ran out of power, I could get somebody to bring a generator and I could plug it in long enough to creep to someplace better than where I stopped. I don't know. Or it might be just the case like when I go to Oshkosh and visit friends up there that I just plug in their thing overnight, and the extra 50, 60 miles I get overnight from them is enough to make it home. So anyway, here we see the energy density of gasoline is really fabulous. But the problem is how the internal combustion engine converts that energy into horsepower is very inefficient. A lot of the heat goes out your exhaust pipe or is radiated by the engine or the radiator. A lot of heat is just gone. Whereas the electric power, an electric motor basically converts all that it uses into going someplace. So it makes them very efficient. And my and I'll get into it a little bit further down here. There's concerns about your source of power for that. Anyway, my little Bolt it's just amazingly fast. Teslas are faster for all you Tesla owners. You also pay more for a Tesla. And in the current EV lines that are coming out, being way overpowered seems to be a big marketing thing. Everybody, there's pickup trucks that will have 1,000 horsepower of electric power. And there's no need for that. There is no need for 1,000 horsepower other than impressing your friends. Just like Tesla made a few of this Model S Scotch that can go 0 to 60 in 2.3 seconds. They're pulling like a G.5 of acceleration on that. I've seen videos where car keys come flying up out of the cup holder under acceleration. It's just crazy fast. So let's go to the next slide. Maintenance, essentially none. Tires and wiper blades. The brakes may last the life of the car. I have yet to prove that, but any of us that have EVs know that you can come to a stop without touching the brakes. The Volt was a little different. It didn't have quite the regen capabilities that the Bolt does, and you would have to put your foot on the brake in the last couple miles per hour before coming to a stop. It wasn't a big deal. It hardly anywhere at all. In fact, every now and then I touch the brakes on my Bolt just to scrape the rust off. It's just like if you have a humid, salty day, they'll start rusting. So you just drive a little bit with your foot on the brake and scrape the rust off, and away you go. Never any oil changes, none of that sort of thing. No new mufflers. Literally, if you put a Bolt up on a hoist at a shop, like to get tire change work done, there's nothing underneath it. There's nothing underneath it. It's just a flat steel sheet at the bottom of the battery pack. That's it. All the brake lines are run inside, except for those that are actually running out to the wheels. All that, everything. There's nothing to see, nothing to go bad. So that works out good. Electricity is far cheaper, even at high prices. I don't really get into it, but I've done some research on paying at level 3 chargers along the way, and it calculates out to like 35 cents per kilowatt that you would have to pay, which is way more than you pay at home. But even at that, when you do the multiplication, you're paying for electricity about the same as if you were driving a car burning gasoline that was getting 30 to 40 miles per gallon. So, you know, if it's something you're not going to do very often, it'll feel a little pricey compared to normal at home, but it'll get you where you want to go, and it's not atrociously expensive. So, uh, I don't even consider that a disadvantage. Most of the entities that have car charging locations have different plans where if you're a regular user, you can pay a large fee up front and then get discounts on your electricity. Or if you just go and pay a la carte one at a time, it costs quite a bit more per kilowatt hour. So, which is what I would use. My Bolt has, our Bolts have high-speed DC chargers, and I've never used either one of them. Haven't really found a place to plug them in, although there is now a charger, high-speed charger in Broadhead at the Chevrolet dealer. I've not plugged into it, but it is there. So drive your EVs on down and we can plug it in.
Alan, can I make a comment
Certainly.
on that? Yeah, there's level 1, which is the 110, level 1 charging, and level 2 is 240 or 220, whatever you want to, which I have in my garage. But then level 3 uses DC, you know.
Yes.
And I don't know, sometimes I hear comments about that reducing the lifespan if you use it a lot. And some of the supercharging that Tesla has may offer that. And if you use it a lot, it may degrade the batteries a bit. I don't know what the ratio of that would be, but it's, I guess Walmart has some of those level 3 DC chargers. Some of the newer Walmarts have some of those. I don't know who else might. That's it. That's all I'm going to comment on. Thanks.
I probably should say at this time that normally you charge at home with 240 volts. Basically, you're plugging into a dryer outlet. And I've done the wiring myself. The thing that you put on the wall that everybody calls a charger is not really a charger. It's basically a smart cord. And inside of it's not a whole lot of circuitry. So you pay several $100s for a smart cord. And they sell portable ones. I have one here in Rockford that literally I can unplug from the wall and take with me if I want to. I could go to a campground and plug it in.
Right. The campground would be the 50 amp plug. 50 amp. You can charge them over there, and they don't know the difference.
The Bolt on 240 volts charges at the rate of 32 amps. Every electric vehicle has its own built-in charger, and that's what dictates how fast it can charge. It's the capacity of your built-in charger. And DC is much faster. The Tesla plug is absolutely tiny. On the Model S, I know you just move this little plastic thing on the left rear tail light out of the way and plug your little plug in there. Although most Tesla owners have adapters to plug into different things. But they charge basically at the same rate at home as the rest of us do, which for calculation purposes, I figure it's 30 miles of range for every hour you're on the plug. So down in my Wisconsin house, I charge in the middle of the night and the low rate starts at 11 p.m. So sometimes you have to do the math backwards to see when you want the charging to stop so that you don't start charging until 11 p.m. This is it's actually one of the complications of owning an electric car. You do a lot more thinking, you know, in a regular gas powered car, you just wait till the tank gets down a ways, then you fill back up again. You don't think about it much. Whereas with electric cars, you do a fair amount of thinking. But that's coming up here in a future slide. I like to do comparisons between EVs and well, all EVs and all ICEs, internal combustion engine cars, it's a cost per mile is like the only, for energy, it's like the only fair comparison to look at things. But you can also, if you start adding in other things like tire wear and brake wear and mufflers and all this other stuff, and you break it down into a cost per mile, then it cost of driving starts to look pretty expensive. And the EV kind of does well in that regard. On the line here for regeneration, puts a lot of energy back into the battery and makes for easy one pedal driving. Literally, it's one pedal. You slow down, speed up. And once you get accustomed to this, and it doesn't take very long, it's really hard to go back to driving a regular car where you got to press on the gas pedal and then press on the brake and press on the gas pedal, press on the brake. Once you get into one pedal driving, it's just like, oh, I'm not going to give up on this. I personally shift between drive and L on the Bolt. Is L is maximum regeneration, whereas the D, it will slow down, but not near as fast as it does in L. So when you're in hilly terrain and you set the cruise control and you're going up and down, you're going downhill at 60 miles an hour, making a lot of energy. And then it'll use a lot of energy going up the next hill. Then it makes some energy going down the next hill. And in this way, in town driving, sometimes we don't appear to use any range at all. In fact, I've even seen the range go up as I drive through town. And most of that's due to the battery warming up. It's not that you're making that much energy with regen, but the battery's starting to warm up and be more efficient. And the tires are starting to warm up and be more efficient, and everything else is. So it's just really odd where you might drive 5 miles and get out of the car and come back and it has more range than when you left. It's like, huh? how did it do that? So this one pedal driving works really great in snow too, because you can slow down and speed up. You can really feel the traction of the tires in snow. And so there isn't a tendency to spin the tires to get going or skid as you slow down. And that combined with the low center of gravity makes them good handling, but not all that great in deep snow. If the snow starts getting more than about 3 inches deep, you're going to start plowing it with the bottom of your car. Although I got to say, I've never had a problem so far with that aspect of things. Let's go to the next slide. There's another thing. You can charge your EV with clean power, whereas gasoline and diesel are always dirty. No matter what you burn in, how little you use of it, even if you're driving a Prius, sorry, Prius owners, you're still burning gas. You're still putting stuff in the atmosphere. And if you have a clean source of electricity available to you, the EV's got you totally beat in that regard. And the numbers, we'll get to some down here at the bottom. A lot of people say, well, I've put my car on display at auto shows just to show off an EV and let people ask questions about it. But then I always get somebody that comes up and wants to say, oh, yeah, but it's dirty because you're burning coal, really. And my comeback to that is always, well, when I charge down in Rockford, it's clean nuclear power. And that always shuts them up. It's just like, oh, okay.
Nice going.
Whereas in southern Wisconsin, it's mostly natural gas. So actually, when we charge in Wisconsin, we've got a natural gas powered car. But it's so efficient at converting that. The natural gas plants themselves run more efficiently than if you tried to burn natural gas in your car in an internal combustion engine. It's less dirty than gasoline or diesel. It's just got less junk in it, basically, that gets pumped out of the atmosphere, but it's still almost the same amount of carbon dioxide as gasoline and diesel, just a little bit less, not a lot, because it's still got the regular inefficiencies of internal combustion. Plus, you still have nitrogen oxide, which happens to anything that where you burn anything, you'll create nitrogen oxide. So that doesn't happen with the EVs.
Can I inject something right here,
Sure.
Alan? Yeah, and the problem with natural gas is there's a lot of blow-by. 15% of the gas never gets burned; it just blows through the engine, and that's why Honda was making Civics powered with that, and they quit doing it because it just doesn't work. Yeah. So, and by the way, a combined for southern Wisconsin, a combined cycle natural gas plant runs around 60 or 65% efficiency. So it's better than a lot of power plants, most power plants across the board. It just still pumps out CO2. That's the problem.
Lou, did they have the same problem with that blow by when they tried to switch some of the semis to natural gas?
Could be. I don't know. I think it's true of all internal combustion engines. There's blow by on them.
Yeah, wow, I wasn't aware of that at all. That's very interesting.
Some of the waste management was trying to use their, some of the waste management companies were trying to take the methane out of their landfills and power their trucks, but I don't see that going anywhere. I think that stopped.
Wow. Okay. Cool.
Well, here in Rockford, and I think Madison too, you have natural gas powered buses. We have natural gas powered dump trucks down here. There's a big natural gas station not far from where I live, and that's where all the dump trucks go to fill up with it. And as one person pointed out when I did a seminar on this topic one time, is they said, they use a lot of electricity to get the natural gas to a high enough pressure to have a storage amount. It's several thousand pounds PSI in their tanks that they have, and it takes really special tanks to hold it. And so in a way, they're kind of electric powered too. So it's like, okay, you got to use a lot of electricity to pump up the natural gas in order to burn it. But on the plus side, we don't have these diesel trucks spewing soot into the air. That's the main advantage of natural gas powered ICEs. You can also burn hydrogen just like that. And maybe as more hydrogen becomes available, and if ever there's a network built up to where we can fill a tank with hydrogen, you're still going to have that issue of needing to spend electricity to compress it. But the output from your tailpipe is some water vapor and the nitrous oxides, because you're still burning oxygen.
But wouldn't you still have the blow by problem with the hydrogen just the same as you would with natural gas then?
Yes.
I'm not sure about that, but it could be. But the hydrogen is just the devil of a thing to store. It's just problematic. And I think what I'm reading lately is they're using ammonia as more of a storage intermediate for hydrogen. I don't know, ammonia. It's more stable, easier to store.
Yeah.
But toxic.
Yeah.
Of course.
At the bottom of this slide, I mentioned the Union of Concerned Scientists. They have a map available on their website that shows different parts of the country and what for charging a kilowatt of power, what it's equivalent to in miles per gallon in an automobile. And it varies. If you're up in the Pacific Northwest, where there's a lot of hydropower, it's like off the chart clean. And here in the, like around West Virginia and Pennsylvania, where there's a lot of coal power still, it drops way down, like in the 30s equivalent of MPG. So on average, here where it says on average, and this is like averaging the different EVs and the different places that you can charge, you get like a national average of 88 MPG out of charging your electric vehicle.
Would that apply to the Midwest, do you think, Alan?
I would pretty much say so, but it's like when we look at what's that other power map that we like. Anyway, it quite often all you can get is like you're looking at the entire grid, but the grid we're in here in Illinois stretches all the way over to the East Coast, and Illinois is heavily nuclear powered, and that electricity is getting used here. So my car is basically nuclear powered here in Rockford.
Nice.
Whereas just a few miles away, when I drive up to Broadhead, less than 50 miles away, then I'm on natural gas, and so it's not near as clean.
Sure.
So it's hard to really pin it down.
Sure, I understand.
As to what you're actually getting, but all in all, an EV is far better for the environment as far as things going into the atmosphere than driving a gasoline powered car.
Yeah.
That's all it boils down to. And let's go to the next slide. We were talking about free public charging. I took this shot. This is in downtown Stoughton, where we often go. It's a 30-mile drive for us from our Broadhead home to Stoughton, and we go to a couple different places for breakfast. On Saturdays, where the Volt, which is on the left, is parked, they have a farmer's market, and you can't park there. And I'm parked opposite it here with my Bolt chud plugged in. This is a level 2 charger, so we're going to get 30 miles of range, enough to go home. So it's like half the trip to go to breakfast is free. But there's this odd thing, and this isn't the only place where this happens, where they make the handicap parking and the electric car parking the same parking spaces. And so it's like, okay, is it wrong for me to park in the handicap space to charge my car or not? So in this case, to obviate that, I just parked on the opposite side from the Bolt. But
there's no, you don't need a charge point card for it. It's just straight free. Okay.
Yep. It's the standard level 2.
That's nice.
It's available pretty much everywhere.
And who pays for that? Somebody's got to pay for it.
The city of Stoughton's paying for that.
Okay, that's nice.
Okay. By the way, it costs thousands of dollars to put one of these simple 2-point chargers in. It's not a thing, but it's there's a lot of incentives and state funds that are available for this sort of thing. I don't know all the places around Madison, but I do know by the Middleton Public Library has a free charging in that area. So there's places around, and I like I say, I've gotten it elsewhere. And there's even been a few private businesses that put out free charging, and I've taken advantage of that. But you might have a long walk to whatever it is you want to do. There are plenty of maps on the internet to help you find charge points. You don't have to bump into them.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is one of those. Let's go to the next thing. Cons. Here we go. And there's going to be several slides here about range, because it's all about range. It's the number one concern with people about buying EVs, and there's a really good reason for that. There just are not enough high-speed level 3 chargers out there. In the previous slide, I'm at a level 2 charger, and I say I'm there for an hour and I get 30 miles. Well, if you're on a long trip, that's going to take all day. If you need to put 200 miles worth of charge on your car, that's going to take a long time. It's not a problem when you're at home and it's overnight to fill that much range back up, but out on the road, what are you going to do? I mean, even when you got a level 3, you're going to be sometimes upwards of an hour putting a decent amount of range back in your car. So you got to have a restaurant to hang out in, or a public library, or bring a lawn chair and a good book with you. You'll see people at Tesla superchargers sitting in their car reading a book or playing with their phones. You got to do something to kill the time, and most people can't tolerate that. They want to fill up their tank. It takes a few minutes, and away they go. That's what they want to do, and that's what they're accustomed to. And I understand that. So
well, 15 minutes isn't very long.
There's a lot of things happening that's going to bring this about. So
yeah.
Let's go to the next slide. In the last one, when we don't need to go back to it, I said something about there being luck involved. It's entirely possible you get to a charger that's on your map and it should work with your car, and then the thing doesn't work, or somebody else is plugged into it. Tesla's superchargers will cut you off, and if you overstay your welcome, and then they will charge you a pretty hefty fee for overstaying your welcome on the charger. And I don't know that that's available on all the other ones. I've also seen more than once places where I could get free charging, and there'll be an ICE vehicle parked in the space. Some people are contemptuous of it, and they just don't care. So that's part of the luck aspect of things. Anyway, here's a little bit about the price of electricity. I don't really need to go into it. The Bolt is one of the most efficient vehicles there is. Considerably better than Teslas and some of the other new EVs. What's happening is a lot of the new EVs, they're catering to the SUVs and the larger vehicle market. And larger always means more weight. And it's going to take more power to push that weight around. And you're going to be going down. We just stopped to look at a brand new Chevy Blazer EV, $60,000, sitting on the dealer lot in Broadhead. And the window sticker said that it would consume 35 kilowatts to go 100 miles. So that's a little less than 3 miles per kilowatt. And that's the kind of range I get in the winter running the heater. So that if you start looking at window stickers of EVs, this is apparently part of the EPA's thing, and so that's become the standard for what it's going to cost you. And it's odd because I've been telling people for a long time that I can go 100 miles for $1.50, and quite often for less than that. But based on my Wisconsin 7 cents a kilowatt hour rate, it's pretty close to true. I can drive 100 miles for $1.50 worth of electricity. So that's certainly better than feeding my Suburban. Range varies a lot due to hilliness, to temperatures, ambient temperatures, your driving style, whether you're gentle or a lead foot. So it affects the range. Let's go to the next one here. And it's planning for range. I even struggle with this, and I'm well acquainted with it. I'm going to go on a trip from my house in Rockford over to Freeport and up to Broadhead, and then maybe back to Rockford, a three-leg journey. It's like, am I going to be able to make it? In the wintertime, it's kind of iffy if I don't charge at one or the other. So if I'm doing one of these three-leg journeys, my mother lives in a nursing home in Freeport, and that's why I go over there. So go over there, and then I'll get up to the Broadhead house, and then I'll put it on the charger so that I have enough that I can make it with a good supply back to Rockford. So you got to think about this. I've gone on a ski trip where I left Rockford going to Mount Horeb, and then stop in Broadhead and charge for a while so I could get there and back, because you're running the heater, your range is less, And so it's all stuff you got to think about well ahead of time. The bolt will start flashing red notices at you when you get down to about 40 miles of range. And I've been down there. The lowest I've ever had for range when I pulled in my garage was 23 miles after a trip from Oshkosh. And my stomach was a little tight. It's like I got enough range I can make it home. I know it's, I got 10 miles left to go and I got 33 miles of range. It's like and I made it, but it's a little nerve-wracking.
Allen, I'd like to comment that if you have AAA tow you too many times, they'll tell you that they won't tow you anymore for free for for running your battery down. Now, of course, I didn't have to worry about that with my Tesla, but was my Saturn, the one that we converted many years ago. After I had that, I don't know, I probably over the years had that towed about 4 times because of battery running out, or that kind of thing. And they said, we will no longer tow this vehicle for this reason. just saying.
I've recently seen some things, and I looked into it about so people were complaining. It was an online thing. It was written by a police officer that had to come and they had to get a tow truck for a Tesla because the 12-volt battery had died and the people were locked out of the car. Well, it turns out that these cars have a hidden port where you can connect up a 12-volt source and at least unlock the car. On my Bolt, you can actually unlock the door with a key and then open the hood, and then you could put a new battery in, and you better have a new battery because just or be in your garage where you can charge up the old one. But without the 12-volt battery, which runs the lights and the radios and everything else, it's not going to go anywhere. In an old ICE, you can get a jump because once you got the engine running, the alternator's cranking out electricity to keep everything else going. Even if the battery is totally junk, if you can get it running, it'll run off the alternator. But the EV doesn't have that advantage. The main battery pack charges the 12-volt battery, and I don't know that you could jump it and make it go. I'm also reluctant to jump other cars off my 12-volt battery. It says you can do it. People online says you can do it, but I'm kind of reluctant to hook a set of battery cables up to the 12-volt battery in my Bolt. So, yeah, take that risk if you want it.
And that 12-volt battery is a lead acid in most cases. Now, I hear the newer Teslas don't use a lead acid for that. I don't know. There's something different. More, they draw current with a lithium. I don't know what it is. Does anybody know? Maybe somebody can comment.
Yeah, I remember them saying when they came out to our PLATO class that they were going to switch from lead acid 12-volt batteries to lithium ion. So I suppose in the newer ones they've done that. Now I've got the old. I think Richard, you and I both have the old lead acid 12 volts in ours, right?
Yeah, I think they're both 5 years old. It's a while.
Yeah, a lead acid battery can be much smaller than or a lithium ion battery can be much smaller than a equivalent lead acid, but their main disadvantages is they produce, and we've all had this happen in devices like your lawn trimmer or whatever. It's going along just fine, and then it stops.
Well, yeah, the reason for that is
lead acid gets kind of weak slowly. It kind of gives you a little hint. Okay, I'm going. You better change me. But a lead acid just up and die on you.
Well, the lithium ions will die on you suddenly, but that's because of the battery management system, and that's protecting the battery. The lithium ions you can't run down to absolute zero. It'll ruin them. Okay, so
yeah, but you also it's also useless to you if it's has reached that cutoff point. Then
right, yeah, and it does, like you say, that battery management system cuts you off like boom, and there's no warning, there's no slowdown like with the lead acids.
Yep. Let's go to the next slide, Richard.
Sure.
We're still on the range thing. As what everybody knows, you really should only charge lithium-ion batteries to 80% to get the most life out of them. But that's still less range. And I've struggled with this myself. I can charge my Bolt to 80%, but I drive an awful lot. And if I don't put that extra 20% in there, then by the time I squeeze through a day, my range is getting precariously low. And oddly enough, on my wife's car, which is just a couple of years older, there's no control over that at all. You can't set it for a different charge level. So that's, I have no thing with that, but still it's part of the whole range equation. I say if you're driving around town mostly just doing errands, that 80% full charge would be quite the thing to go with. I would do it, think nothing of it. But I've read some reports on how these lithium-ion batteries decline kind of rapidly, and then they level off for a long time. And then what do you guys know about the long-term decline of lithium-ion batteries? Here are the EPA's, and this is right from the EPA website, says that, you know, we can expect 10 to 15 years in moderate climates and 8 to 12 years in severe climates. And I don't know if Wisconsin is severe or not. So
right, I think we're going to find that out, right? But yes, you know, Tesla warranties theirs for 8 years, but the battery researchers said that they expect that they will last 15.
Okay.
Yeah, I just read an article that a Tesla driver went something like 125,000 miles and only lost 8% over 4 years. So 8% of the battery over 4 years is not bad. It's a pretty good ratio.
Yeah. Well, we don't know if this person's been charging to 80% or not. Also, a thing when you're on the highway doing a charge is Tesla says you should only charge to 80% because it's actually true that with lithium-ion batteries, the last 20% goes really slowly. It takes as long to put in the last 20% as it did put in the first 80%. So, and a thing where people are always asking me about range is they say, well, how long will it take you to charge the battery from, dead flat? And I said, well, first of all, it's not going to be dead flat.
No, never.
Nobody drives it down to zero. You don't time it till you got zero range as you pull into the garage. You just don't do that. So I said it's every night you plug it in and you charge overnight and you're good to go. You basically have a full tank every day. But do we know anything about the cycles on lithium-ion batteries? There's certain limits to how many times they're charged, whether all these little partial charges are hurting you or not, or as Lou brought up, whether really high-speed charging is hard on the batteries.
Well, and the other problem that may get introduced is that vehicle to grid idea where, the utility's taking power out of your car when it's sitting in the garage when they want to. And I think, you're going to cycle it a lot more. So if you're limited by the number of cycles that you can charge, right?
I think it's full cycle chargings. So they may be in the 1,000 full cycle, but somebody did some math on that. Like you're never really charging full cycle very often. So
right.
And they go quite a high number of cycles, way beyond 1,000, maybe beyond 3,000 of normal cycles, easily. It's just not an issue from what I've read, if I recollect properly.
I can't imagine personally ever agreeing to have my electric company siphon energy out of my car at their will.
Right.
That's somebody's dream. I just don't think it's ever going to happen.
Yeah,
I agree
they
with
would
you,
have
Richard.
to. They'd have to get your permission for that.
Yeah,
That
Sure.
would need a special program for that.
yeah.
I think it'd smoke your battery pretty fast.
I find the Ford Lightning ad where they plug in their house Christmas lights to the truck hilarious. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? But you can do it. I mean, the point is, it does have a point where you can plug in 110-volt things if you need to run a circle saw or something like that. You've got that capacity. But you can go to any of the tool places around and buy an inverter and clip it onto any car and do that, and they're not expensive at all. So it's not that big a deal. Anyway, let's move on to the next slide, Richard.
Geez.
Oh yeah, if you go looking around on the internet, there's plenty of electric car fire things to look at. I decided not to use a slide with one actually on fire. Yeah, they happen. If you break through, particularly with Teslas, if something happens where the cells get damaged and shorted out, that's where most of these fires come, and it's not necessarily from charging. Now, some lead acid batteries, and you'll always see pictures of laptops that caught fire and other things like that. Lower priced, cheaply made lithium ion batteries seem to be more prone to catching on fire just from charging or use. I really don't know a whole lot about it, but it is true. And the airlines are not particularly thrilled with you carrying lithium ion batteries around, but everybody knows you get on an airplane with your laptop and they won't throw you off for that. So it's
also, they don't tell you that something like 170 to 200,000 ICE vehicles catch on fire every year, which is much more than the number of electric vehicles that catch on fire.
Good point.
Yeah. This point comes up at those auto shows where I'm talking about my car, and then somebody will always say, well, don't they catch on fire? And I said, well, nowhere near as often as gasoline powered cars catch on fire.
Exactly.
It's not a pretty scene. A friend of mine actually witnessed somebody die in a car fire, and I can't imagine seeing that. That's like, I don't want to think about that. And so I don't worry about it. If the car seems to be on fire, I plan on getting out of it. So.
Right, and most of them have mechanical releases on the doors too. At least the Tesla Model 3 does. So that, if it catches on fire and it ruins your, ability to energize the car, right? Because the battery's been cut off from, maybe the energizing to your door, that kind of thing. You just lift up on that mechanical release and you're out.
Yeah. And the bolt's the same way. It's just got ordinary door release. Also, in my own personal case, we charge our cars in detached garages. So I worry even less about it. It's like, if it burned the garage down, it burned the garage down,
That's a good idea. Yeah.
Lose a few tools, but probably not going to spread beyond that. Tire wear. This was distressing when I first had to buy new tires for my car. I was shocked at the price of new tires. They were really $1,000, and I got a $200 discount on them because I signed up for the Goodyear credit card. But they wear out pretty fast. And there's a question down here. We'll get to that in a minute. But that is a cost, and it's something to figure into your cost per mile. I also don't have on here that in both Illinois and Wisconsin, you get the privilege of paying an extra $100 a year on your license sticker because you're an EV. But I've done the math on that, and it's when you break it out, is if you had a car getting 40 miles to the gallon and you're paying for the gasoline tax, you're paying about the same in your $100 for taxes as that small car is up to the 10,000 mile point. And beyond 10,000 miles, then it's free for us. So I'm typically driving 15,000 miles a year in my car. So that other 5,000 miles is a little bit cheaper. So that should be under the advantages of EV side. Illinois, a couple of years ago, had really cheap plates for EVs, and you didn't even have to renew them every year. But that's gone away.
Right.
You know? And also, Illinois no longer has. You don't have to have the ugly EV plates. You can have any car be an EV, and as long as you pay, it's just like Wisconsin. You can be an EV with any kind of plate. So.
I've got another expenditure to add in, and I have questions from any of you. Wheel alignments. I'm hearing like every 40,000 miles, a Tesla needs a wheel alignment, and I don't know what those are. A couple $100 each or more. I don't know. Do you find that true, Alan, on the Bolt?
No, mine drives straight as an arrow and never so much as looked at the front end. So
maybe
I don't know why.
That's just a Tesla shop thing, or the Tesla shop thing where they want to generate more money. I don't know, but or do any of you Tesla owners see unequal wear like after 40, 50,000 miles?
Nope. They never raised the issue, and I've never had a problem in 5 years.
Yeah, I rotate my tires very regularly, particularly since the new tires that I put on, that the rotation is free. So I go in and I have the shop lift the car up and move the tires around. I just had it done on my wife's car. It costs a whopping $20. It's like well worth it, just to spread the wear around.
Absolutely. I'm a big believer in tire rotation. Thanks.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that at all. I guess I've replaced my tires once since 2018. And you know, obviously they're going to balance them when they put the new tires on. But I wasn't aware that they needed to be rotated more frequently.
Well, it's the alignment and balancing are two different things, and you don't want to have an out of alignment front end or rear end with new tires, because they'll wear
in 5 minutes.
They'll wear prematurely.
Yeah.
We should. Wordle.
Okay.
How are we doing on time?
Where's the lunch?
You're gonna have to check. I think what I'm gonna do is pull a bagel and a piece of.
So let's go on to the next slide, Richard.
Sure.
We've already been at this an hour here. This is what's next. Toyota has kind of poo-pooed EVs. They have some plug-in vehicles and they have some pretty good hybrids. But them and Mazda have kind of held back from going the EV route. But Toyota is moving forward with EVs, and this racy looking thing is something to look at. They're talking about having kind of holding off really until they can come out with solid state batteries. And I would leave it to Lou to describe what a solid state battery actually is. But they're talking about having 700 miles of range and 10-minute charging. That would be so awesome and would be a huge game changer. But a comment I've made when people talk about range is that even if you had 700 miles of range, there were people who would run out of electricity. They just wouldn't keep track of it. It doesn't matter when and where you charge it or how fast you charge it. They would just simply drive until there was none left. So you gotta have that awareness about you.
Yeah.
A Volkswagen TDI can go 500 miles on a tank, and people run them out of gas. It's like so. Let's move on. Yep. If you want a Toyota EV, you can buy one of these. This is the lower end of the same thing. Most of the manufacturers are gearing up for this sort of crossover SUV kind of car. You can go get a Kia that looks like this. You can get a Hyundai, which are basically one and the same. That's like this. Everybody, Chevrolet's going this route. Chevrolet's got their new Ultium battery pack, which is going to be the basis for most of their new cars. And that's where the things that their costs are coming down on doing EVs is because they'll have a base chassis that they'll put different bodies on. And so the expensive part in the bottom, it'll be basically the same from one car to the next, and they'll just have different bodies or maybe a slightly different length to the vehicle. And we thought the Bolt was going to go away, but now there's talk of them hanging on to having the Bolts, because the Bolt is really one of the most popular EVs out there right now. They're inexpensive, relatively inexpensive, about $23,000 for the cheapest ones. That's before getting any rebates. So anyway, Rivian trucks are built down in central Illinois. I've seen them around, and I've also seen them on tow trucks. So I don't know what's going on with the ones on the tow truck. Somebody run out of power? Did something go bad? I don't know. There's been a number of startup manufacturers coming in, and like Tesla did, it's somewhat easier to build an electric vehicle than it is an ICE, where you got to have all these parts, or you got to outsource the engine from another manufacturer and all that. It's far easier to buy an electric motor and a bunch of batteries, and glue it all together. And so there's more of these startup kind of companies. So we've got some comments that I've heard at the Chicago Auto Show. I had media pass. There's a day when the media has the whole place to themselves, and they have these wonderful breakfast and lunch, dinner presentations. It's really awesome to have the privilege to go there and hear right from the top executives what they have in mind about vehicles. And every last one of them saying, we're going to EV. We're not going to, Toyota said that they were not going to make any improvements to their internal combustion engine technology. They were still going to sell them, but they weren't going to waste any effort trying to design new engines. They all believe that we're going to be run around in little pod cars, ride share things. I've written entire stories about ideas on automation. On one hand, I like it. One hand, I'm afraid of it. And the other hand, there's some vast inconveniences to having a little pod show up that has somebody that just been in and it had a sick stomach, we'll say. So
just a comment about engines, ICE engines. Yeah, BMW in Munich will not make any more of their engines there. They maybe some other factories, but even a high-end manufacturer like BMW is getting out of the ICE engine business.
Yep. So yeah, they're going full steam ahead on this, and so it's going to become that you won't have much choice. You'll have to buy an EV if you want a new vehicle. But I think the ICEs will be around for a long time yet, but they're being phased out. And I think as far as high-speed charging will be the game changer, and some battery technology like the solid state where you can charge a lot of range in a very short period of time, that will be the real game changer. Just as having lithium ion come along here just in the last couple of decades and change the whole electric car game away from lead acid batteries. And this technology just keeps changing faster than you can keep up with it. So, and if we couple it with a future that's all electric and we have plenty of nuclear power providing the power, it'll really be good for the planet in the long run.
A lot of the Alan, a lot of the advances are in manufacturing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was that during that period of 2010 to 2020, the battery, the lithium ion went down in price tenfold. It went to 1/10 what it cost the beginning of the decade. It's a lot of it's manufacturing, and it just gets better and better. They do tweak the chemistry a bit, but the manufacturing really is what makes it work.
Yep, yep. And the bottom line here is there's a recent report that despite having sold quite a few EVs, they're not really selling all that well yet. And I think what you're seeing as comparisons is I think EVs are doing really well in the sedan market, the small SUVs. But compared to everybody still buying pickup trucks, not so much. It's still pickup trucks as far as the eye can see, and they all want to burn gas in them. A few people have been brave enough to buy the electric ones. I have a deposit for a Chevrolet Silverado EV, a whopping $100, but I don't know that I'll ever take advantage of it because I use my little boat like a truck. I can get 8-foot long boards in it, and there's shoved entire recliners in it. I don't see much need for a truck, but I'm in line. So one more slide here. You can tell I personally love driving EVs. I love burning a little gas in my Miata top down. I say that I'm willing, being an early adopter, I'm willing to accept the financial risks of owning an electric car, which basically boils down to is if I had to replace the battery out of my own pocket, I don't know what I would do. Abandon the car. There's some people that claim that there's junkyards full of electric cars. I haven't seen it. But you know, I'm still willing to take that risk. Charging on the road isn't an issue that much. The one trip that I alluded to in an earlier slide is the destination we want to go to is a remote boat marina in south central Illinois. It's 250 miles there, and we have about 250 miles of range and would have to get a charge to get there. And once we got there, we could probably charge on 110 volts, but it would take a long time to fill it back up. And so that one charging place, we'd have to hit go in both directions and have the luck that everything worked. So that's why we drive the truck. It costs a lot to drive the truck down and back, so we don't make the trip that often. But the infrastructure is building very rapidly. Tesla claims to have 50,000 superchargers in place worldwide. It's easy peasy to use, and they're putting more of them in all the time. There's 2 of them in Rockford, and they're usually convenient, and there's places to hang out while you're waiting to charge. There are plenty of naysayers, but people thought that the automobile would never replace the horse. Well, we see how that worked out. So cars replaced all. So one more slide and we're done here.
I don't have that slide.
I added one at the end. I can just tell you, and that is that the greatest source, and it's put out by our government, is fueleconomy.gov. You can memorize it. It's easy. It's a great source for comparing any kind of vehicle, almost any age. It goes way back in time, but you can compare older vehicles, newer vehicles. And if you want to see the listing of all EVs available that the EPA has tested so far, they're just all right there. Take your pick and compare how they use energy from one to the next. It's pretty easy. And they also have a lot of good other helpful side information about vehicles of all sorts. So it's a good source. So we still got 11 with us. Questions? I see there's a couple chats down here.
I'd like to make a extraneous comment. I noticed a story in the Times last week that said the electrolytic converter thefts have increased factors of 2 or 3 continually. And that's going to be difficult to control and difficult. So it represents, when the insurance companies get folded in, it means that the technology is increasing the price of ICEs, and the technology is decreasing the price, the use of EVs. So, you know, that is an example.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a interesting comparison. Yeah, people are, there's platinum in a catalytic converter, and that's what they're stealing. And oh, they're quick with doing that. They'll do it in parking lots in the broad daylight. It's crazy. I can tell you, they will not get the battery pack out of a bolt in a parking lot. It weighs a lot. It takes a special hoist at the Chevy dealership in order to take the thing out and put the thing back in.
Well, part of it is the battery pack becomes part of the chassis in a lot of the vehicles now, and they're part of in the whole car. You can't separate them anymore on the newer ones, I think. One comment I have with my Bolt, and I've noted, and I haven't gone through a winter like Allen has. He's gone through several with his, but I do see the charging capacity going down a bit, and it just runs the battery down a bit in the colder weather. Likes warmer weather, that battery.
Yes. But when you see the range displayed in your car, the computer has figured out not only the battery capacity really isn't going down that much. It's less, the flow is apparently somewhat less, but also you got rolling resistance of the tires and all the other bearings and things that are moving around, and the computer's figured that all in. And that's why that odd thing happens, that as you drive it, it sometimes has more range as you get going. And other times you sit in the garage and say, you got 260 miles, and you back the car out of the garage and you head down the lane. And it says, you now have 220. It's like, what? You liar.
Yeah. I noticed that. Yeah, it's, I'm actually going to heat my garage up on the floor for the car over this winter and see what that does.
Well, you lose a lot of range in the winter because you're heating the passenger compartment, right? And you're heating the batteries.
Yeah.
The batteries. You know, and an ICE car loses efficiency in the wintertime too, also because you're heating the, you know, the passenger compartment.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
a thing that's true across both ICE and EVs is that the more efficient your vehicle, the more little things cause a detriment in efficiency. If you're got a car that gets 40 miles to the gallon and it starts getting cold and all the bearing factors and stuff start coming into play, you'll lose 5 miles to the gallon. But if you're only getting 15 miles to the gallon and you lose that same percentage, it's almost unmeasurable. It makes no difference at all. My Suburban towing a big sailboat gets 10 miles to the gallon, which is a loss of 30% to the Suburban. But I tow a tiny sailboat behind my my Bolt, and I lose 50% of my efficiency.
But keep your tires filled up in the winter. You have to keep everything maxed out to get the last bit of mileage out of it. And when it gets cold, tires contract, and got to put more air in them.
Yep. Yeah. In a perfect world, if you filled them with nitrogen, they wouldn't change. But it's kind of hard to get nitrogen unless you got your own bottle. Anyway, any other questions? We had Doug, who's no longer on. He had to go, but he asked how many ICE cars per EV on the road. I don't have that number.
I think it's about 1 or 2% EVs, isn't it? I'm just throwing a
Yeah.
number out there that I've heard in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
Might be a little bit more than that now.
And he kind of asked that question in regard to like the fires. Yes, there are a lot more ICEs out there, and the percentage of them that catch on fire is very low. There are higher numbers of their fires than EVs. So percentage wise, but the numbers that I've found by looking at how many EV fires have been reported is still pretty low relative to the thousands and thousands of EVs out there. So it's still not a big issue as far as I'm concerned. So.
Yeah. I don't plug mine in overnight, just on general principles. Even though the cost is lower, I figure I can absorb the cost, and other times of the day, I just like to be around and keep an eye on the car. Of course, it is an attached garage, so that makes a difference too.
Well, didn't your airplane have a fire once? Didn't you have a battery fire?
Yes, I did. That was a Chinese thing, and it came to me from a unethical supplier, and it was very unfortunate, but I've never forgotten, and I have a deep respect for possible fires. I've got a funny little story. I'm not sure if I want to share it with you, because it's a bit embarrassing. But I was flying. You talk about range anxiety. I'll tell you, you have a lot of range anxiety when you're up in the sky. I was flying. Normally, my philosophy was not to take off unless I had the battery over 50% charge. I have a system in the Tesla. The guy from Tesla came out and said, "Don't put it in miles, put it in percentage point, because you just can't trust the miles." And I did the same thing with the airplane. So I had it always. It came out of an electric motorcycle, but the whole system was read in percent, and so you could get, within 1% of the charge of the battery. And I followed that regulation pretty rigidly. But one day I thought, well, it's just a little bit below 50%. And I think I'll go up to a ferry up the river, Wisconsin River. And I did so, and I was having a nice time. And as I turned over Lake Wisconsin at the north end of it, I noticed that the rate seemed to be going down faster than it did during the first 50%. I was already down to about 25%, and I thought, gee, that's quite a drop. So what I did was I climbed very slightly, and then I entered a long, slow glide back to the airport, and went as straight to the airport as I could, given the wind conditions, etc. And I ended up landing on the strip of the runway. And you talk about having a little bit of a tension in your gut. It was reading 4% when I touched down. And I was still able to taxi over into my hangar before it dropped to 0. But the propeller kept pushing me into the garage just fine. That's 0%. So I thought, well, I won't do that again. But that was a test that you don't plan ahead of time, because I was expecting the discharge to be constant. And in this particular motorcycle, it wasn't. It was a little faster after 50%. I'm sure of that. So these things you have to learn with, especially with an aircraft. You have to learn these things, and sometimes you do get a bit of nervousness with range anxiety. But it all worked out fine, and I do consider myself sometimes a lucky individual. I think many of us do take heart in the fact that we managed to overlook something and still get through. But I was glad that day that I managed to get back without any problems.
Yeah, I try to make to destinations in my car, my final destination for the day, with not less than 50 miles of range left. That's a pretty good padding.
That is good padding. Yeah.
Like back in the days when I flew an awful lot, I considered being below half a tank is getting pretty low. There was a recent discussion at the EAA chapter saying, well, a guy wanted to get a stick, calibrated stick, to put in the fuel tank of his Cessna 150. And I said, I've flown over 50 years and have never put a stick in my fuel tank. And they had like in shock. I said, I get down to half a tank and I fill it back up again. It's like I've never pushed it. I just never going to say, well, just see how far we can go with this amount of fuel.
Yeah.
I've maybe got down to a quarter a few times, but it was with some reluctance that I did so. But in airplanes, if we got a few minutes, there's unrelated to this, is that your safest thing that you can do on a long flight is to have a big cup of coffee just before you go, because you'll want to land and get rid of that coffee before you run out of fuel.
Right. Right. Well, that was really fun, Alan. I like your talks, your sense of humor, and putting some humanity along with the facts. It makes it an interesting presentation, and I think that electric vehicles do have a bright future, and it's nice that to see the things on the horizon that you described today. We have one more talk coming up next week. It's the elephant in the room that we haven't talked about much as a group, overpopulation. I found when I had about 30 slides, I was raising issues that were difficult, and I just didn't feel comfortable going any further. So I decided to give a preview for 10 more slides of a talk that I have starting to prepare for next spring. It's a very exciting subject. I'm not going to tell you about it because I want you to hope that you'll persist and attend, and don't get discouraged if the elephant in the room gets you a little bit bored, because the really exciting 10 slides I'm saving for last. So we'll look forward to seeing you all next week, and that'll be.
Hey, Richard, somebody else had a chat.
There's a chat by Jeff in here about EV fires that wait, I didn't see until I scrolled down.
Oh, okay.
And Jeff's still with us, I believe. It says our EV fires hotter than gasoline cars. The problem with EV fires is it takes a special foam to put them out. The firefighter, you can't just spray water on it and put it out. It's not so much that they burn hotter, but I guess once they get going, they're really going, like we saw in that slide that we had there. So yeah, it becomes a catastrophe before the fire department can get there. That thing will be engulfed in flames. So is it hotter? No. Is it hard to put out? But most fire departments are now aware of EV issues. Under the hood of the EV, there's a designated places for firefighters to cut a cable to disconnect the batteries and things like that. So they're a lot more aware of it now, but not every fire department's got the special foam it takes to put out an EV fire. So
in the EV fire that I had in the hangar, there was another plane right next to it, and it got a bit of smoke on the carbon on the finish of the plane, but it had gasoline in the tank and it did not ignite. Nothing else in the hangar did, just the central core of the plane where the batteries were. So it is a fairly limited fire, but undoubtedly there's a lot of chemical heat there.
Yeah. Well, as an aircraft insurance adjuster, I've been to places where entire hangars burned down and the gasoline in the fuel tanks never caught fire.
Okay, there you go.
If you have a full tank and the tank stays intact, then it tends not to burst into flames.
Good.
And all car fires, except for maybe Pintos, involve a leak. you got to have a leak somewhere to cause a car fire. And I always laugh in movies as a car goes off the edge of a cliff and bursts into flames. Like, why did it do that? a car will quite often tumble down a hill all the way to the bottom and never catch fire. Some do and some don't. It kind of depends. So,
yeah, they need oxygen, and if you don't have that mix of oxygen with the fuel, it's not going to ignite. Good job, Alan. This is very informative. Thank you. And
all right,
thanks
a
a lot.
great job.
Thanks. And thanks for Richard for your help with the slides.
You're welcome.
All righty.
Been a pleasure.
Have a good Thanksgiving.
Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving to all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.